All right, Shawn. Actually, it was really great to talk to you before we're actually doing this. That's one of my favorite parts is the kind of the discovery pre-production. You just seem like a great guy. So thanks for coming on here.
Dude, thank you very much. I've actually never done, I've done a couple of podcasts and I've never done that pre-interview before.
Yeah.
And it was it was great. It got my head in a couple of interesting places that it wasn't before. It was awesome. I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it too. And I have this whole kind of new segment on the podcast really about people who have created or manufactured new equipment that is really maybe not on a large scale yet with a lot of people. And I love to promote people who are doing things like this. So let's talk about your product and let the world know a little bit more about
Okay.
it.
I have a patent on a piece of equipment called the Bodybuilding and Mobile Functionality Hammer. It's got BAMF stamped on the side of it. It is a short-handled strength training hammer. And the thing that makes mine unique, there are a couple of them that exist on the market, but the thing that makes mine unique is the head is made in the same fashion as a crumb rubber bumper plate. It can take the same amount of force. It can withstand the same amount of damage that, dropping a barbell from overhead can, meaning you do not need a tire to incorporate slam contact into your training session. So you can flow from the posterior chain loading of a kettlebell with a slightly different handle orientation into the kind of underutilized upper body rotation of a mace or an Indian club, underused in Western strength training, and then flow right into that slam modality without having to change out the piece of equipment.
Fantastic. Because I know because there was basically has been a pretty large movement towards usage of tires and sledgehammers to hit onto the tire. But then one of the aspects is you're adding tires to your facility.
Yeah. or your home gym.
Yeah.
And I can pick that apart. Look, if I'm bringing a tire home, my wife is planting flowers in it. That's
Yeah.
how this is going to work. And for a lot of people, I have this conversation in the comments section, which is always really positive and incredibly supportive. But people go, just get a tire or go chop wood. And I'm like, you're cutting out every major city. It's great. I grew up chopping wood, but it's not practical for a large portion of the group of people that are trying to get healthier. So for me, this wasn't the concept that created the idea, but in its development, I think it is useful to go out and spend a day chopping wood, but that's not practical for a lot of people. And we deforest the planet very quickly.
Sure.
In a first world culture where we are not chopping wood to stay warm, we substitute those modalities in a training environment. So the question is, are we doing that effectively and in a way that promotes athleticism and does the best to compensate in as many realms as possible to prevent injury? And that's really where my head was as the hammer was developed.
So when did this really start populating in your mind, like how you wanted to develop this?
I was watching a movie. We won't say which one for legal reasons. Your audience is probably going to be able to guess. But my background, I've been in strength conditioning for ever now. It's been like 17 years or something. But before that, I was an actor and I did a lot of stunt work in live performance and things like that. And I was a big comic book nerd. So when the MCU comes out, I'm in. Even if the movie's awful, I'm going to go see it. They got my money. They got my money.
Right.
But there's a scene in one of the movies where Hemsworth is throwing that thing around and I'm looking at it like, that's not how that would biomechanically work. Because if you throw a baseball, and that's how he throws the hammer, if you throw a baseball, you've got a whip that you've created in your body, and the tip of your finger is the crack of the whip. And we put the baseball in it so we can create as much force as possible. When you add something like a hammer that has this uneven distribution of load, you're changing the length of the whip, which means the entire mechanism of action really does need to change. And so I'm looking at this going, am I just blowing smoke? Who knows? So I went into my garage and I took a railroad tie that you can get them at Home Depot and use them to make garden beds. I cut about a foot of it off and I bolted a rod to it. And I almost dislocated my shoulder, just trying to throw the thing around. But as I started messing with it, the usefulness was apparent. It's very much like a kettlebell in the way that we swing it. I'd been a big fan of maces and Indian clubs before that. but having trouble understanding why they weren't more prevalent because they're so useful, especially for the rotational health of the shoulder. And you look at some of the popular forms of fitness in the United States, and you do see shoulder problems and elbow issues. And like a simple application of this rotational stuff in a warm up or a cool down helps fix that. But you don't see it happening because you can't win and it's not showy. And it turns out if you give most guys in the gym something that makes them feel like a superhero, they'll do whatever you want them to do with it. And I'm just like, good. Okay, buddy, just do your mobility. I don't care. And then you got that slammable aspect to it. So in the beginning, when the first one, I was messing with it for about 2 years, that early prototype going, I've got to make this out of wood. I can't make this out of wood. It's got to be something that bounces. It's got to be something that strikes. Because I would take it to, there was a local playground that had that chipped rubber matting all under the stuff. So when the kids fall, they don't die. And I could take that thing out there and just beat it. And it was great. And the cardiorespiratory load of that boom, over and over again, you can really take the intensity considerably higher than you can with a sledgehammer and tire. Because a tire is going to do a lot to kill the momentum that you put into it. The hammer puts that Banff hammer puts that momentum back into your system. So you're bouncing that and then re-establishing control with as the momentum goes up and it comes back down. So for me, I technically invented it, but I think of it more like I just dug it out. Like I uncovered the usefulness of this shape and these loads in terms of the usefulness that it has for a variety of sports. So I'm working now with some baseball coaches and some lacrosse coaches and Ninja Warriors. So that's a group of athletes where the elbows and the shoulders just real, like the amount of deceleration and the force that's put on that joint is really high. I myself have had to have one of my elbows reconstructed because of that sport. So that's, and then just little changes like what does the pommel, the end of the handle look like? What is that shape so that it is ergonomically make the most sense? There is specifically another short-handled strength hammer on the market that has a pommel shape that if you were to be dynamic with it, you could run the risk of bruising one or two of the bones in your wrist just because of where things strike. And if you get hurt at the gym, it means you can't go the next day. So that's something we try and avoid. But that's really how that started and how it progressed. And then at one point, I was coaching out of a CrossFit adjacent style facility and had someone, I discovered the right material to use. We actually made them out of bullet backstops. So the company I was buying this material from, they supplied the military with live fire training houses. So they had these giant blocks of rubber, 110 pounds, and you could build facilities out of them essentially. And the guys could go in and do live fire drills and the walls would just drink the bullets.
I see. Yeah.
It was a pain in the neck trying to figure out how to cut the stuff. It was terrible, but that's what I was making them out of in the beginning. And once I made it out of rubber and now we've got the slams and it was really working, somebody came to me and was like, how much to buy one? And I was confused.
You're like, what?
I don't know. But that's really how it's gone. And then that gets us from the hammer I designed the first one. My son's 12, so 11 and a half years ago. And we're going slowly. We submitted for a couple of things and got some support. We won a competition with Dollar Shave Club and we're starting to grow. And in February of 2022, or the year before in 2021, I was doing about 30 units a week. Like I was cranking them. And then in February, my house burned down and you're making these things from home. And the question becomes, we have to rebuild the house. Can the product survive and wait? No. Okay, let's jump in. Let's actually produce these in a facility and the piece of equipment that I was looking at first was going, okay, the bumper plate can handle the damage, so we have to make it. We just have to figure out what that process looks like. And then we smash cut. We're on our fourth manufacturer since 2022, and we've been through 3 sets of molds and The heaviest weights we still don't have molds for. Currently, I make them from 5 kilos up to 5 kilos, 7.5 kilos, 10, 12.5, and 15. The next mold will get us our 20 and our 25 kilo unit. And then we'll expand, because some people do that mace length handle. We'll expand and do them with the short handle and the long handle. And that's where we'll call our product line finished. But yeah, there's 11 years of history, and hopefully I didn't talk for 11 minutes.
Yeah. What's been the hardest part of this whole process, you would say, with the production of this?
So I was pretty insistent on keeping the production in the United States, just because I like knowing that I'm providing jobs here. And with friends of mine who I've met over the years who produce their products elsewhere, you had COVID happened, and we had friends whose products were sitting in the Port of San Diego for weeks and weeks at a time. And I just didn't want to deal with it. And it's not a political thing outside of going, I don't trust either side to make the right decision here.
Right.
I want to know that I don't have to get it across an ocean. And as we're looking to expand, and we're getting interest from Europe and South Africa and Australia, I'm looking to go, okay, my mold guys are going to make you molds, make them there, and we'll figure out what that looks like. But I'm a good coach. I'm not a great business person. So that's been really the hardest part of going, okay, I spend the majority of my time confronting the things that I'm not good at and trying to make them work, sometimes to the sacrifice and detriment of the stuff that I am good at, which is the coaching side of it and the application. But that's been the hardest professional part of that. There was some personal stuff that went in there too that was pretty catastrophic, and that definitely took the lion's share of my emotional credit dealing with that side of things. But that's been the biggest one. I would say the second is people get very in their zone when it comes to the way that they train. So when I was first posting online about it, you get a lot of getting comments with people going, oh, it's made of foam, or it's fake, it's a cosplay toy. And it does look like a cosplay toy. The thing is bloody massive. So I started just destroying stuff. Like, okay, it's not fake. Here's me destroying a TV But the real moment of realization, the aha for most people, is when they hold it for the first time. So we're limited in how fast we can grow because I'm only one person and I've got a job and a mortgage and 3 kids, and a wife, and can't travel the way that I would like to. We're getting to the point now we're going to be going to 2 expos and an event this year. We're going to be going to the Gathering in North Carolina that's put on by Norse Forged. We're going to be going to the Music City Fitness Expo in Nashville, which we've been 4 or 5 times there. Amazing. If you're close to the Nashville area around the time of the expo, it's well worth it. They're doing 2 days this year. Brian Shaw is going to be there. Jay Cutler's going to be back this year. They've got a huge lineup, and we'll have a booth. And then we'll also have a booth at Home Gym Con, which is Candyland. If you've got a gym, a home gym, you better go with a budget. I would say take cash and not plastic, because you will make bad choices.
Yep.
That place is amazing. And just now that the manufacturing side is finally figured out, I can show the product and actually sell it, as opposed to going, here it is, join the waiting list. But yeah, those 2 things have really been the biggest constant level of stress chewing on my mind.
So I'm thinking too about our listeners who are primarily fitness professionals. And I think everyone, it's interesting how people feel about their equipment, right? The things that they're into and the zone. Talk a little bit more about the surface, because I imagine my colleagues might think, hey, this sounds like a great idea, but where can I actually use this? Is this just a home gym item, or can this be used in a facility I'm working at type of thing?
Sure. The question you have to answer in that context is the people in your facility, how do they take to noise? Because the slams are loud, because the striking surface is flat. When you are slamming it on the ground, there is this sometimes quite deafening sound. So that does become a question. I'm a coach at Crunch here in Georgia, and the turf that we have there, that muddles the sound. I actually think turf is a perfect surface for it. because you can still tell when you strike correctly because you get that auditory feedback, but it's not quite so loud. I have had 3 customers, 2 in Los Angeles and 1 in Miami, or possibly the other way around, have the police called on them because a neighbor thought somebody was firing up. But it can take like this, a gym floor, if you're dealing with concrete, is going to be able to take this. You're going to get very few people that are slamming the 25 and the 20 kilo units. Those are really, you got to be pretty strong and pretty big to be wielding those. But honestly, the slam it's a nice cherry on top. It's beautiful icing to a piece of equipment that is much more versatile than just whacking it on the ground. Like a mace, like an Indian club, I would say the majority of my clients that are using it are actually deconditioned, overweight. They're dealing with balance issues. They're older populations because the shape of it requires focus. It requires attention. The feedback loop for your athlete gets really small. And for your audience that are coaches, you know what we're talking about when sometimes you just look at some client and go, do you want to be here? You're here, but the investment, the emotional energy to pay attention to what you are doing is not there. So with something like a dumbbell or even a kettlebell, that's what I was noticing, especially with barbell style movements. But then you give them a hammer and they're like, I can't use this. And I go, no, you can. You just have to be paying the level of attention that I wanted you to give me with the kettlebell. I just need you to be paying attention, because the uneven distribution of load means as I go into a press or as I go into a squat, I've got to be holding on, and I can't let that lapse because the hammer will just fall out of your hand.
Yeah.
You can't balance it in your hand like with a kettlebell. And please, kettlebell people, don't come at me. I'm not saying the piece of equipment is useless, but like you can hang a kettlebell on an open palm and it's not going anywhere as long as you're somewhat engaged. If you try that with a hammer, you're gonna drop it. So for your athletes that are very deconditioned and really need to be spending a lot of time building the proprioception of spatial awareness, now you've got a load that is lighter than is going to be overly taxing on their primary musculature. But because it is so awkward, the central nervous system is doing a lot more work, and they're going to be getting more out of it because the mental buy-in is there. And that's one of the things in the fitness industry that I've noticed a lot, especially with like machine-based stuff. You're going in, you're doing your reps, you're doing your weight, but are you really focusing on contraction? Are you really focusing on control? And you can tell the athletes that are, because they're receiving very different results. Now, the hammer's not, I call it the bodybuilding and mobile functionality hammer because it has application in both disciplines. But as a bodybuilding tool, if you're really trying to get on stage, you're probably not using the hammer for much, but besides like warm up stuff to make sure the shoulders are buttery. But a facility of any kind can adapt. They don't take up a huge amount of space and they have vast application. So the question really becomes, are your clients, your curmudgeons, going to be complaining every day that somebody's sitting there slamming that thing on the ground? But then you're just limited to, does your staff know what they're doing?
Yeah.
What is their education level when it comes to the biomechanic? Because somebody really seeking to learn from it is going to pick it up and immediately go, oh, this is how this changes squats. This is how this changes this. This is how this changes this. And the doors just open up, but you put your hands on it and then apply your wealth of knowledge to this different shape and just go. And as long as you and the hammer are learning from each other, and that's how I frame it to most people, it's more of a relationship than anything. And if you really do get good with any particular piece of fitness equipment, it is a relationship. Then there is no limit to what the application looks like, so long as you don't hit yourself in the face too hard.
That would be a problem.
It would.
Yeah, for sure. Shawn, this is awesome. I want to support you and get this out to my colleagues, our colleagues, to see it as an option for themselves. And
I appreciate that. And what I'm going to do is you got to send me what you want the code to be, but I'm not going to a percentage off that is going to be offered to your colleagues and to your audience just for the sake of the support. deeply grateful for the opportunity to chat with you about this, man.
I'm deeply honored that you were having this conversation. I love talking to my colleagues. My audience knows that. I got into the business because I like creating meaningful relationships, and fitness just a byproduct of
Mhm.
that for me. This is always a joyful endeavor for me, always talking to my colleagues. Where can they look? This will be in the show notes, everyone, and we'll get that discount code and the whole thing there. But just tell everyone where they can check this out as well.
Sure. So I'm most active on the Instagram page. That's just at BAMF Hammer. We do have a TikTok. It's BAMF Hammer Official over there. And then the website is bamfhammer.com. But like every piece of contact information comes directly to me. I got to have a conversation with a client or a customer 2 days ago. He called, just like, I don't know which one to buy. I'm looking at him, help me
Yeah.
find what weight is right. And we chatted for 10 minutes about what his training aid looks like, what the wear and tear on his body is. And I actually directed him to go a little bit lighter than he was looking
Yeah.
for, and go spend a year and a half with the 12.5 kilo. By that point in time, we'll be producing the 20 and 25. And if you decide you want a greater challenge, you could always upgrade and get something heavier. But more weight is not necessarily the best course of action.
That's exactly right. Awesome. Great advice. Shawn, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Dude, I appreciate you.